I'm less sympathetic towards adults. Not totally unsympathetic, but less sympathetic towards adults. I'm very sympathetic towards children because and just
Yeah.
they can't control the environment, they can't control their parents, they can't control anything, right? And even if they're living in hell, literally, even if they're being beaten, even if they're being starved, even if they're being mistreated, they literally have no control. And I don't know when that control kicks in. 13, 14, 16. At some point, maybe they've had enough and they run away or they get put in foster care. I mean, like any number of situations can happen, but up until that point, and even then, they get taken from one situation and put into another situation that they have very little control over. So, very sympathetic towards children. I worry about kids a lot. I mean, it's one of those things. I'm less for adults, not completely,
And I
but
guess we have to look at it from the sense of those kids grow up to be adults who've
that's
had
right.
the experiences that they had when they were kids,
You're right.
right? So
Yeah.
so it's like we could look at our upbringing or we could look at our circumstances and what got us to this point in our lives, right? Like I could look at my own life. I could look at the fact that my dad worked his ass off, like seriously worked his ass off for our family. When we lived in Egypt, we were not wealthy by any means. We lived in an apartment complex. We were on the ground floor of the apartment complex, but we had a swing set like that was part of the whole, apartment complex. There was a swing set in the yard area, right? And so it was our backyard, and my brother and I used to climb up the swing set and sit on top of the wall in our backyard, and across on the other side of the wall was this dumpster, right? So it was where everyone was going to just like dump all the trash, like all the garbage trucks were dumping all the trash. So we're on our swing set and there's kids on the other side of the wall digging through the trash heaps looking for something to eat, right? So while we weren't rich by any means, like we weren't wealthy, but I was still conscious at that time of having more than those kids,
Right.
right? Like
Yeah.
of and feeling shitty about that, like feeling like, man, like that sucks that, sorry, I don't know if we're allowed to curse on
Oh
this,
yeah,
Oh
but
yeah, sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
feeling bad about,
yeah.
those kids that they didn't have what I had. And then, again, my dad worked his ass off and like we left Egypt, we went to Singapore, and then, and as time went on, our lives became more and more comfortable based off of what my dad did for our family.
Right.
Yeah.
But it also allowed me then the opportunity to come to the United States, right? So those are, as much as the word privilege has become a really kind of dirty word in a lot of ways
Yeah.
towards some people, because it feels kind of like an insult, or it feels like, man, like, no, you don't understand, like I worked too and I did this and I did, yeah, absolutely, but we are born into certain privileges based off of certain things,
Yeah.
right, and circumstances. So to ignore those, um to ignore them, or to say that you know that I agree with you. I empathize so much more with a child than an adult, right? But we have to acknowledge that where these adults came from,
True.
Yes.
like
Yeah.
what it is that they went through in order to get to the place where they're now an 18-year-old young
Yeah.
adult trying to get a job, but they've only ever known life on the streets, or they've only ever known complete extreme poverty, right? So they
Yeah.
only know, and they live in the hood, right? Or they live in an area, in a community where the only way that they know how they can make some fast money is to whatever it is,
Yeah.
right? Like
Sell
whether
drugs,
it's
whatever.
legal
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
illegal,
Yeah.
right? Like, so it's just like that's the way, that's the life that they're born into. And so at what point do they then become, yes, as adults, we're responsible for the decisions that we make. As children, even, we're responsible for the decisions that you make, right? Like everything has a cause and effect, and so, or consequences to our actions. But I guess I look at it from a very, um I don't think it's black and white,
Yeah. No.
and I
No,
guess
it's
maybe
not.
black and white is not the right terminology, but I don't think it's as cut and dry as saying like, oh, well, once you reach a certain age, you have to take responsibility for your life because da 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 da. I
Well,
agree. Yes, you do, but
yeah.
we have to acknowledge the circumstances that gets people where they are.
Yeah, and I think mine. There's not a point that when it cuts off, but like I think for me, like I'm not gonna go, oh, he's 25, he should know. But like I'll tell you, and this is something inside of me that um, I was always a business person, even before I was old enough to work, right?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, this is I will keep the PG, but I'll tell you, so like in middle school, I would take, and I've said this before on the podcast, so I don't mind saying it again. I would go and I would buy porno mags, and I would rip
Mhm.
the pages out, and I would sell them for $1 a page in school, right? That's illegal, obviously. But those magazines would have, 50, 60 pages, and I would buy a magazine for 13 bucks, and
Great.
I'd make,
Smart.
50, 60 bucks, right? And I was
Super
doing
smart.
that. So like when you talk about, hey, people may grow up in an environment, like I grew up poor, and my mother hates when I
Yeah.
say that, but we grew up on military bases. We grew up in other countries. I remember you were talking about on top of your swing set on the military base we were at in Germany. I to this day remember there was a swing set. You could climb up the side of the swing set, and there was a brick wall, and that was the wall that basically that divided the base from the general population of where we were at in Germany, Frankfurt. And I
Wow.
literally would climb that wall with some of my friends, and we would sneak into this other guy's yard, and we would eat basically berries out of his backyard, of his tree. We were poor. I mean, but there
Wow.
were, we lived on military base. I had 3 younger brothers. My father wasn't an officer in the military, even though he ended up getting educated and ended up doing very well. But at that point, we were entry level. We were barely getting by. So I grew up that way, and then we moved military base to military base. And so I grew up. I was always entrepreneurial, but I just didn't have the tools I needed to have that right outlet, right?
Yeah.
So like I see that, but some children don't even have that, right? So like I try to be aware of that. And when I say I'm less empathetic towards adults, I think more so, to put that in better context, more so that's an adult that I know or know of and have watched and witnessed their behaviors, their acts, their activities, like the way they do things. Like people that, if I see a homeless person on the side of the road, and it's a common habit for me, like we'll get snacks, drinks, but a little goodie bag. If I give them food, I always put money on top of the food, because some people, sometimes they don't want food, right? They want to go get drugs, which I don't care. Like I really don't. Like I want, hey, here's what I do. I've got the food on the bottom. Here's where it's from. It's from Cabuto's. It's from the steakhouse. It's steak and chicken. There's utensils. I put some money on top. I hope you have a good one, right? Like, yeah, I wish you the best, right? Because if they don't want the food, they don't want the food, right? So I
Yeah.
try to do that, and I do that whether they're 50 or 15. It doesn't matter. But when I say less empathetic towards adults, it's more like I have adults all the time that ask for help, but all it takes is a little bit of looking, and I can see that they're making very different decisions in their lives, and that's directly contributing to where they're at. So I try to have a different
Yeah.
type of conversation and redirect and say, well, maybe you can do this and this and this and this. And then based on how receptive they are to change, or how receptive they are to hearing some type of criticism, even if it's positive, and hey, we need to work on these things, like that's where, because for some reason, even kids that are in extreme poverty, even kids that have no reason to be hopeful, it's crazy to see those children still have hope, right? They still think that they can conquer the world, and they have nothing, right?
Yeah.
They're getting abused, they're
Yeah.
malnourished, they're this or that, and they still have something inside of them. Sometimes when you get to an adult, that's gone, and they've given up on themselves. They've went down this path, and so that's kind of where I start to draw a line. Like, I'm gonna help, but I can only help so much, because this person, I'm gonna help, but I can't change the direction because they're unwilling to change. And that's not
Yeah.
always true, but I just seem to see that over and over. Once they get to a certain point, I don't know if it's an age or just a certain mentality, they don't want to change, right? And that's where
Yeah.
I start to go, okay, with this person, like I can't try to change their life. All I can do is make sure they're not starving. Like I can give them food, I can give them, and if they go buy alcohol, like I don't care. It is, I mean, like
Yeah.
I actually respect that a little bit more. Like, hey, need money for drugs. If I see a sign that's honest, hey,
Yeah,
I want to go
yeah,
buy
yeah,
some
yeah.
beer, right? I'm
Yeah.
giving that guy money.
Right.
Right. I
Uh,
feel that.
Yeah. But I don't know, man. There's not a set in stone thing, but I even kids that are violent, like they're violent for a reason. Like I'm sympathetic to them. I mean, like I think our criminal justice system is too hard on children. I think there's definitely got to be punishment, but I mean, damn, you at 13? I mean, how do you treat a 13 or 14 or 15-year-old as an adult? That makes no sense.
Right.
Well,
Right.
I think about these topics a lot, these issues a lot, and there's definitely some serious problems with the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
But when I look at problems in society, and if I see an adult commit a crime or or living a certain lifestyle, my first question is, what environment did they come from? What produced this human? You know, why is this person behaving this way? What factors did they face in their life as a child? Because we were all children at one time.
Yeah.
And sure, once we become adults, it's harder for us to change. You know, less neuroplasticity or whatever. But I think, I guess my hope is that we will, as a society and as all the societies globally, will start to realize that we really need to invest into our people, into our society. And if you want to have a good society, you have to have good people. You have to have happy people, successful people. And also, I want to see us to continue to improve and progress with technology and innovation and science and all these things. And I think in order to do that in the most efficient way, you need to have everyone involved in that process. So, instead of, and I was poor too. I grew up poor, and I think people like Daniel and myself and yourself were outliers. Compared to most people in the population. Most people that come out of poverty or a less privileged environment, they don't have they don't have those opportunities, or they don't have the mentality to maybe get out of that bad environment or change their path. A lot of people they just are sort of products of the environment they grew up in. You know, and I think even in this country, we shouldn't have ghettos in the United States. We shouldn't have projects here.
I agree.
We shouldn't have poverty, and I think eventually we won't have poverty here, and I think eventually globally we won't have poverty. If you think about the issues with immigration in the United States and stuff like that, well, the solution to the immigration problem is helping solve the problems with those countries. Why do people want to leave those countries? Our neighboring countries, if they're that bad where people want to leave those countries, maybe there should be a focus on building up that country too, and that solves a lot of these problems. But, I think I think some of the solution is revamping the criminal justice system in this country, because I think a lot of our laws just make people worse. They don't encourage improvement or have any kind of they don't deal well with mental health issues. When you cage people, you throw people in cages and then you put them back in society with criminal records. They have no opportunities, and most of those people had no opportunities anyway. They're not really qualified for a lot of stuff. So you start with the children, and you start fixing. We just need to heal our society. We have broken areas in our society that we need to fix, and I think once we fix those, I think as a whole our society will do better. And there's probably, well, I'm sure there's a lot of talent also in some really, there's a lot of really talented people in some really bad situations, and we'll never discover their abilities or their talents because they're just trying to eat. They're trying to live, and I hope we can change our perspective so we can see how much better society can be.